Hey, it's Manelli, and today I'm going to show you how to achieve a dimensional balayage look utilizing some highlights, and I'm going to show you how to do some creative toning while blending in gray using Studio Stylist Express and all Kenra color. Now let's go ahead and get started. As you can see, my client has some previously highlighted hair. It's been about 6 months since she's been in. She has about 25% gray throughout the back, but in the front she has a natural gray money piece going on. So we're looking to just enhance that so she has a really easy grow out. She doesn't like to come into the salon too often, so a balayage look for her is going to be perfect. For her sectioning, I'm using her natural part and then just bringing down a 2-inch wide section right on top of that ear because we're just looking to enhance that natural money piece that she has going on. And we're going to be really focused on highlighting this head of hair and then doing some creative toning. So for this project, I'm using Kenra Professional Blue Powder Lightener at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 20 volume developer. Because my model has really dark hair naturally, I know open air hair painting is not going to cut it even though we're going for a balayage look. So I am going to be foiling her entire head, but I also need to keep in mind that I need to create a lot of depth and background in order for these highlights to really pop. So I decided to get started with some internal highlights in the back, so I'm not doing any hairline highlights for the underside, plus she doesn't really wear her hair up too often. And I'm starting off with a V section. I did take a 1/4 inch wide section and then using my weaving comb by Fermar, it actually sections out the highlighted pieces for me. And in addition, using a coup board along with some foil is going to help create this balayage rooted look for me. I decided to use a V pattern right on this occipital because of the way that the highlights are going to drape all the way over to the ends of her hair. In addition, this is giving me enough background that is essential when creating a balayage look. In addition to background, it's all about how we're weaving. So typically I would go in with a TZ light, but I decided that I was going to be using this weaving comb by Fermar along with a 1/4 inch thick section and this coup board. So all of these tools is really what's going to help create this look for me. You can also see the application that I'm using is the highlight is a lot higher on the exterior of the hair and a little deeper on the interior. So all of these things put together is what's creating this balayage look for me. But my application is also saturated and incubated inside of a foil, therefore giving me a lot more lift than had I just surface painted and let this process open air. Throughout this entire application, I'm going to be alternating between diagonal sections as well as horizontal sections, and I'm even going to create triangular sections as I get closer towards the top. What you'll notice with this center section is that I have a deep V application. So I decided to still carry on with that balayage look for this interior, but since this is a very centered section that I'm working with, it was imperative that I kept it nice and balanced. But as I work throughout the sides, you'll notice that all of the application is going to go a little higher when I'm dealing with the face frame. For this side section, you can see that I took a pretty deep diagonal section going from her temple area all the way back. And the reason for this is because we're still going to be adding in that money piece along with that front hairline application with some baby lights. So I still need enough depth going on right in this particular section above the ear. But my application for my lightener is in a half V, so it's slightly higher going towards the face and a little lower in the interior. So always keep that in mind when doing this type of balayage look and technique. Now, if you don't have these weaving combs available, this technique is still achievable. So the way you're going to want to do it is still take a 1/4 inch section and then do a really uneven weave right on top of that. And what this is going to do is pick hairs from the bottom of that 1/4 inch subsection as well as the top. And it's going to create a lot of depth and density for you, almost what a teasy light would create without the tease. From this point forward, every section that I'm going to take is going to be a triangular section. So you can see here, this is almost like a perfect square sitting on top of the head. And I'm just going to take a diagonal section from corner to corner, creating that depth. So the highlight is going to sit on top, and then my depth is going to have that triangular section, creating a lot of diffusion. Just remember that anything that you apply on the interior should be balanced. So it either needs to go from dark into light or that dark into light with a V pattern. Anything that sits on the exterior is going to have a little bit more lightness and brightness towards the hairline, but deeper and darker on that interior. So I'm going to continue on with this pattern until I get the entire back section complete with these types of highlights. And I'm going to finish off with a traditional mohawk section until I get to that money piece sectioning. But I do want to talk about this board that I'm using. The reason why I do like using it is because it has those teeth on the ends. So this helps push back any little flyaways or hairs. Again, creating that teasy light effect for me, but without really fully teasing it. So that's really why I love using this board. But again, if you don't have this tool, not a problem. You can still achieve this look with a traditional weaving comb and a regular balayage board, or just simply foil. Just remember that foil is needed when working with this dark of hair. So in order to create a really cool end result, you're going to need to lift the hair past that level 7. So a level 8 or even 9 is essential to creating a really nice, beautiful, neutralized and cool tone. Now I finally got to the top, so I have a pretty wide triangle to finish off with. So I'm gonna just finish off with all horizontal placement from this point forward, but still keeping in mind that I want that dark to light effect. So I'm still taking those 1/4 inch sections with the weaving comb and then still using that coup board to push the hair up. And this is what's going to really create that balayage effect for me because I have enough background on each of my sections. So I'm just going to finish this right on up until I get to that very front hairline that I sectioned out the very, very beginning. One thing to keep in mind is the amount of gray that we're blending in. So as I get more closer to this top and front hairline, I know that she has a lot more gray to blend in, so my subsections are going to be a lot smaller than what I created in the back, because in the back section she has about that 25% gray. It's pretty sporadic, so I'm not too worried about blending in each and every single gray hair. But when I do get closer to that front, I want to create as much blonding as possible so we have a lot more lightened pieces to work with. This is really important to know, especially when we're customizing these balayage looks for our client and we're incorporating gray blending. So it's important to really pay attention to the gray pattern that each and every single client has, so that way you create the lowest maintenance possible. Now I'm going to continue on with these horizontal sections all the way to that front hairline, but like I mentioned, they're going to get smaller and smaller subsections as I get closer to where that natural gray money piece that she has. I decided after speaking with her that I was going to keep this nice and centered instead of incorporating her part, because she did say that she wears her hair in different directions. So I didn't want to compromise that in any way. So keeping the application of these highlights really balanced was key in this blonding portion. For these last few foils that I'm going to be putting in, just note that each of the subsections are about 1/4 of an inch wide and then graduate to 1/8 of an inch wide. And then I'm finishing off with back to back with really no hair in between each of these foils. I am taking the lightener all the way to the root area because, again, since she has a lot of gray hair going on here, I want to make sure that I'm creating a more blonded look and not leaving her natural gray, even though we are going to be blending in whatever was left out when we get ready to do her creative toning portion. One thing that I'm really careful with in my application is making sure not to overlap the lightener, especially around this hairline. So I am leaving out her ends, and if it is a little bit dark, I do weave those pieces out, but it's just something to keep in mind so you don't create breakage, because we definitely don't want that, especially for that money piece area. Now, the reason why I left this front hairline last is because usually the hair right along the hairline is a little bit more finer in texture. Plus, she's already gray. There's not a ton of pigment to lift out. So this portion is actually going to lift pretty quickly in comparison to the back. So only processing her for about 20 minutes or so, and definitely checking on the foils. But overall, she does have virgin hair. It's gonna lift nice and evenly. So that's really the primary reason why I left this hairline out. Plus, I don't really like leaving lightener for too long on the hairline pieces because, again, it's typically finer in texture and a little bit more fragile. After I'm completely done applying my foils on that top section, I'm just gonna apply a few foils on each of the sides. So I do this by combing the hair completely up and then weaving the hair towards me, creating the perfect customized highlight for your client's hairline. I decided to switch up my brush here because I am working with a smaller section, and I do like to get pretty close to the new growth for these particular highlights along the hairline. So I'm still bringing that lightener all the way down, making sure to leave out the previously lightened pieces and securing these foils on the ends. I'm gonna do 2 back-to-back foils with no hair in between. So this is just gonna create a nice jaggedy edge towards the top. So it's not a harsh line of demarcation, but much more softer when you're doing 2 back-to-back weaves. Something to note is that I am leaving out her little baby hairs right on that top section by her temple area. They're just really tiny and really short, and I think they're gonna blend in perfectly when we do the gray blending portion for her toner application. So on this third foil that I'm applying, there is a little bit of hair in between. So this is what would be considered a back-to-back BB light with a little bit of hair in between, still keeping those ends out because I want to maintain the integrity of her hair and no overlapping of those previous blonde pieces. And then for this fourth foil, I'm actually just going to take this entire section, somewhat mimicking what we did on the interior for the back section. So this is pretty wide. So this one's going to be a little bit more of a rooted effect versus those tiny little baby highlights that I did on that hairline. Once I get both sides applied, I'm now going to let her process room temperature, but this is a great time to go ahead and decide what formula you want to create for this gray blending. So I'm going to be using Studio Stylist Express, and I want something pretty close to her natural. So this is why I decided to use that 6N with the 5 ash. So I want something really cool because I don't want a warm effect, and that 5 ash is going to bring it down a little bit darker. So this is why I decided to use the 6N in addition to the 5A, equal parts with its dedicated 20 volume developer. For this creative toning application, I'm just taking her right down the center and then leaving that money piece out that we created and completely separating it out, because we're going to apply this Studio Stylist Express, which is a 10-minute deposit color system in the back. So I need to work really, really quickly. To make this application really easy and quick, I'm going to be applying the Studio Stylist Express from the bottom all the way up. So you can see that I'm applying on that first 2 to 4 inches and then using a comb to comb down this color. And the overall goal is to bring this color down about where the highlights start. So keep in mind that we did that balayage effect in the entire interior in the back. So you can almost see exactly where those highlights begin and end, and we want to help diffuse that line. Another technique that I like to use is simply my hands. So as soon as I get that color on, I'm going to comb it through and then further bring it down with my hands, creating that diffused line, because we don't want a line of demarcation You can almost start to visualize exactly how this is going to look, which is really exciting. So anybody that has gray hair that needs that blending in, but likes that hair painting or balayage look, all of these pieces kind of come together. Everything from the highlight and the foiling and the painting that we did, along with the Studio Stylist Express, that's going to help cover and blend in that gray, diffuse that line of demarcation, and then we're going to get ready to tone those mids and ends so that way we can control a lot of those unwanted yellow tones. Once I get the entire back section complete, I'm now going to switch up my brush, work in that front section, and just apply the Studio Stylist Express formula on the first ½ inch of that new growth. So exactly where that blonde starts. I want to help diffuse that line as well as blend in any gray on that new growth. I'm just tapping that right on in to exactly where I want the Studio Stylist Express to live. And then once I get done applying this, I'm going to immediately mix up my secondary formula for her mids and ends, which is 7SM in Demi-permanent at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 9 volume dedicated developer. And then I'm going to apply that to those mids and ends. But I already started that timer for the Studio Stylist Express because it is a 10-minute color system. So the timer starts as soon as I'm done. So I'm also going to get on this Demi-permanent pretty quickly. If you wanted the maximum amount of control, what I would do is process your Studio Stylist Express separately, wash and rinse, and then apply your toner formula for the maximum of 20 minutes. The overall goal here is to blend the line from the Studio Stylist Express into that Demi-permanent. So this is why you'll see that I'm constantly combing through, and I'm also using my hands to further blend in. So that SSE is really working pretty quickly, and I have about a 5-minute wiggle room. So as soon as I get this Demi-permanent on, I'll just process for an additional 5 minutes and then take her back to the bowl, do a really good rinse, shampoo, and even condition or treatment with a nourishing mask. For her final style, I gave her a really great blowout and gave her some really beautiful curls, but using my all-time favorite Kenra Volume Spray 25. This is a throwback can from 1987, and yes, it's been around that long. It's honestly an amazing spray. It's flake-free, and I love it for creating long-lasting curls. Typically, I use this hairspray for setting the hair as my finishing spray, but I also do love it for a good long-lasting hold that is totally brushable. So this is a 1 1/4 inch Marcel iron, and you can see how well the curls are holding and then even how well they brush out. And here's the final result of this dimensional balayage look, utilizing some highlights along with some creative toning using Studio Stylist Express. So just to give you a little recap, I decided to use blue powder lightener at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 20 volume developer for all of those internal highlights along with her money piece. And once she was done processing, I decided to go in with a creative toning formula and base breaker in order to blend in her gray, utilizing Studio Stylist Express 6N with 5A with its dedicated 20 volume developer mixed 1:1. And then for those mids and ends, I used 7SM in Demi-permanent at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 9 volume developer, and then processed her for just 10 minutes. And to finish off her style, I used a 1 1/4 inch Marcel iron and my favorite hairspray, Volume Spray 25. So I really hope you enjoyed this hair tutorial, and if you did, please give this video a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe. And be sure to check out my other hair tutorials right here on this channel, and I'll see you next time.